Hi there, welcome to my channel. I'm Holly and this channel is all about my exploration of the world of graphic novels, sci-fi, and fantasy. Now, if you've seen my first video on The Killing Joke, you know I started this whole thing because my family is so into it and I'd just like to be a part of it now. To be honest, I'm feeling just a little bit left out. To be fair, it's entirely my fault. I have kept this world at a distance and I have shown literally zero interest. And after what I've read, I'm beginning to wonder why. And I've decided I'm going to blame my mother. Sorry, Mom. Anyway, growing up, I was a voracious reader. I was that kid who always had a book in her hands, and I would rush through my work at school so I could get to the thing that really mattered, which of course was whatever book I was reading at the time. So in the 4th grade, my mother hands me this book and says, "You've got to read this." And it was The Hobbit. Ugh, I'm sorry. Maybe I was too young to appreciate it, or maybe 4th grade is the perfect time to be reading The Hobbit. I wouldn't know because I didn't finish it and I never picked it back up. I guess what they say about first impressions is true. They really are important. And my first impression of the world of fantasy was not great, which is really a shame because from what I've read, I'm having a blast. So anyway, today my original plan was to focus on Wonder Woman, but I got sidetracked and I had to make a pit stop. I had been going on and on about the Batman story and the Superman story I had read to my husband. And he went to his collection, pulled out a comic, told me what it was about, and I thought, I have to read this immediately. But before I tell you what it is, of course you already know what it is because you read the title. But I would like you to consider a couple of questions. Have you ever imagined what your life would have turned out like if just one circumstance had been different, or if just one important decision you made had been different? Would your day-to-day life be dramatically changed? Where would you be? Who would you know? Who would you not know? And have you ever imagined what it would be like if you had been born to different parents? Now, I know some of you probably wish you would have been born to different parents, but that's a conversation for another day. Which leads me to what I'm going to be talking about today, which is Superman, Speeding Bullets. Now, this is from a series called Elseworlds. It's a kind of a what-if series. What if this had happened instead of what really happened? It's kind of a fantasy world within a fantasy world. And the premise of Speeding Bullets is, what if on the night that baby Kal-El was in his rocket ship hurtling through space, reaching Earth's atmosphere, and the winds shift ever so slightly, landing him not in a field in Kansas for the Kents to discover, but instead landing him on the grounds of the Wayne's estate for Thomas and Martha Wayne to discover and raise. Okay, this is going to make an excellent case study for nature versus nurture. How is Kal-El going to turn out being raised by completely different parents in a totally different environment? All right, backstory. I have been really enjoying every backstory I've read so far. And I think it's because I'm so new to all of this. I know nothing about these characters, so I've been having a whole lot of fun seeing where they start out and what happens to them to make them become what they become. So right now it is the Kents versus the Waynes in parenting style. We'll start with the Kents. All right, they were loving, nurturing parents, and they really were not very overprotective of Clark. Can we just say that Clark Kent had a nearly idyllic childhood? at the very least, he had a normal one. He got to do what all the other kids were doing. He ran around and played outside. He went to school. He attended school dances and was on the football team. It appears he was well-adjusted, friendly, popular, outgoing, maybe a little bit of an extrovert. They only had to keep his astonishing abilities a secret. And you know, when I was reading Man of Steel, and as each one of Superman's new powers was emerging, I could just hear the Kents saying, okay, just one more thing. It's just one more thing that we can't let anybody know about. But otherwise, the Kents pretty much let Clark do his own thing. All right, now we're going to move on to the Waynes. In this story, the Waynes were also loving, nurturing parents. However, when they discover Kal-El and decide to raise him, their response was vastly different than the Kents. Kal-El Bruce lived a very sheltered life. The Waynes shut out the rest of the world, and they lived in nearly complete seclusion in their mansion. Bruce didn't go to school. He didn't have friends. Now, he did develop a really strong bond with Alfred, because what else was he going to do? And you know, I don't blame the Waynes. I think that they thought they were protecting Bruce, and they were probably worried that if someone discovered him, that he'd be taken away. All right, so in this almost total isolation, really, from the rest of the world, he becomes tremendously lonely, and he's much more introspective and moody, even to the point of depression. So, you know, I was thinking just one awful event could probably turn him a little more inward and a little bit dark. He was certainly primed to head in that direction. All right, so let's go to the Waynes for a moment. You know, I had been thinking maybe they could avoid their fate. And sadly, they were not able to. In fact, they meet their untimely deaths in the exact same way that they did in the original Batman story. They were robbed at gunpoint, and then it all went to hell, right in front of 9-year-old Bruce. And so, you know, it didn't matter what different decision they made. It didn't matter if their path, you know, changed course just a little bit, because they wound up in the same exact place. And I was thinking, no, predestination can't be real. I refuse to believe it. It's too depressing to think about. So, you know, little Bruce witnesses all of this, and he becomes completely enraged, which enacts his heat vision, burning the man alive who had just killed his parents. And he instantly realizes that he could have saved his parents if only he had known about his heat vision. And so he's feeling all of this tremendous guilt. And I'm feeling very sorry for this little boy who's now been orphaned twice. So what was his response to this tragic event? Well, he's just gonna suppress every memory connected to this evening, including the knowledge of the fact that he possesses at least one very unusual power. All right, so now we fast forward a little bit, and Bruce Wayne is now 21 years old, and surprise, he's a recluse, living in his parents' mansion with Alfred. And now I have to stop right here because I can't believe it. I have to talk about scrapbooking again. Now, if you saw my last video, Man of Steel, I did talk about the fact that I had only read 2 graphic novels, and both of them have scenes depicting scrapbooking. And I was thinking, is this just some strange coincidence, or is this a thing in comic books? But Bruce doesn't actually have what we would consider to be a normal scrapbook. No, he just has a locked room where the walls are completely plastered with newspaper clippings. And he feeds off of all of these stories and pictures of all of the mayhem and violence and awfulness that's just happening all around Gotham City. I mean, he's really feeding off of it. And see, there's the darkness. I knew there was going to be some darkness. And the story explains that the reason he does this, he focuses on other people's pain so that he doesn't have to feel his own. Now, that is certainly a coping skill, I suppose, a coping mechanism. However, it might not be the healthiest one. Now, eventually he does discover what he is. And this is when some armed men come into the mansion, or break into the mansion, and are threatening Alfred. Well, Bruce rushes into that room, again becomes completely enraged, and he easily tosses one out the window and uses his heat vision to injure the other. And those two men just book it out of there. Once they're gone, Bruce turns to Alfred and says, "What am I?" And Alfred is like, okay, it's time. So Alfred takes him to the Batcave, shows him the rocket ship that he had arrived in, and then hands him this big stack of journals that his father had kept, which chronicled Bruce's childhood. So once Bruce read through all of these, all of his suppressed memories just come flooding back, and he says, "I remember everything. I am now freeing myself of the past, and I am going to become who and what I really am." Well, that's a little scary to me because in one being, you've got all of the powers of Superman coupled with vengeance running through his blood, Bruce Wayne. What is about to be unleashed upon the world? Okay, so now we have adult Kal-El entering the world as Bruce Wayne and Batman. And the very first thing he does is decide to take a much more hands-on approach at Wayne Enterprises, which is a good thing because Lex Luthor has waltzed in trying to take over through a buyout. All right, Lex Luthor is quite the character, isn't he? I guess Metropolis wasn't enough for him. Now he has to have run of Gotham City too. And to be quite honest, I actually think Lex Luthor is better suited to Gotham City than Metropolis. You know, he is into running all kinds of illegal things. I don't want to, say those words out loud because I don't know if I can. But anyway, I think Lex Luthor and Gotham City are an absolute match made in heaven. Of course, Bruce tells him to pound sand. But there is a little interesting thing that we find out. Apparently, Lex Luthor has been in seclusion for a year because he had suffered terrible, grievous injuries in an explosion at a chemical plant. That story sounds eerily familiar, doesn't it? Is this Lex Luthor? Or could it be? I don't know. I'm going to have to keep reading to find out. All right, so the next thing that Bruce does is he sets up a newspaper called the Gotham Gazette. All right, that makes sense. And he gets all of the top people from all over. So enter Perry White to run the Gazette and Miss Lois Lane as the top-notch Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. And so now we've got opposite world going on. Back in Metropolis, Lois Lane loved Superman and she could barely tolerate Clark Kent. But in this story, in Gotham City, she loves Bruce Wayne. She really admires his idealism and his compassion and his desire to change Gotham City. And she absolutely is repulsed by Batman. Oh, she's seen him in action. She saw what he did when he had to save her, of course. He saving Lois Lane from some very unsavory men. She heard the splintering bones and smelled the burning flesh, and she thought, this is a psychotic animal. Stay away from me. However, the journalist in her was just a little bit fascinated by him. So I thought, well, maybe she can get an exclusive interview with Batman. You know, she wasn't able to do that with Superman. Maybe she'll have a little more luck. All right, so I've actually kind of brought you up to speed here. We are now at the ending of this story. And, oh my gosh, the end of this had so many twists and turns. It was a roller coaster ride. To be honest, I felt like I was in some bizarre Neil Simon play. So I'm going to run through this as quickly as it obviously was written. So, a man burst into the offices of the Gazette, interrupting Bruce and Lois playing kissy kiss, and shouts, "You will not run that inflammatory story on Lex Luthor." Oh, and by the way, Lex Luthor is dead. He died in that explosion, and he was reborn as, remove mask, the Joker. Who couldn't see that coming? But I was happy. Yay, I'm going to get some Joker. I'm going to get it. So anyway, he grabs up Lois Lane and flies her out of there in a contraption that looks straight out of Inspector Gadget. So he tells her, "Ha ha! I am not the Joker. I actually am Lex Luthor, and I've come to take over Gotham City and rule it with you by my side." So then Batman swoops in, saves Lois, and then we hear, "Ha ha! I really am not Lex Luthor. I am the Joker, and I'm using LexCorp money." Okay, wait just a minute. How the hell did he get his hands on LexCorp money? "I'm using LexCorp money to build up a revolutionary army." They've already taken over the streets. "And I'm going to rule this city and rename it Jokerania." Jokerania? Oh my word, I am telling you, there's got to be a better name. You gotta let me know if you come up with something that's a little bit better than that. But it's the Joker, and me likey. I need more Elseworld. I am having so much fun with this story. And speaking of having so much fun and needing more, if you enjoy this content, I ask that you take a moment to subscribe, hit the like button, and come back for more. Okay, so we're now in his Jokerania. And of course, Batman begins threatening him with all manner of bodily harm, including ripping him into tiny little bits. And the Joker says, "Huh, Batman, I think you might be as mad as I am." Now, isn't that just the Joker's MO? He is always trying to convince other people that they are as crazy as he is. I think it's because he just can't stand the thought that he might be the only lunatic around, or maybe he just needs company. Anyway, Batman saves Lois. He saves the city. Lois discovers that Bruce Wayne is Batman, and she challenges him to use his decent, compassionate side, to change things instead of turning into this horrifying, awful creature. She wants him to be a symbol of hope. That sounds very Superman, doesn't it? Anyway, all right, they kissy kiss and ride off into the sunset. The end. But speaking of which, I do have a couple of little things that I would like to say about this, and they are a little bit critical. I'm trying to be positive. I have loved everything I've read. I love this story. I would read this one again. All right, let's talk about the ending for just a moment. It is a bit frenzied, okay? It's, "I'm Lex Luthor. No, I'm the Joker. Lex Luthor, the Joker. What am I?" I thought that part actually could be a little bit reworked. However, it being so frenetic, I think you could make an argument that it's the Joker. chaos reigns around him. So, you know, maybe this kind of speeding up really toward the end, I mean, that might, I think you could make an argument that it might work. But to me, I felt like I was reading a Stephen King novel. Okay, Stephen King is a fairly creative guy, and he can tell a pretty good story, but his endings are terrible a lot of the times, and I think he's just like, I am sick of this. Shh. I am done. I'm going to write down the very first thing that pops into my mind, and I don't care. So yeah, I'm not a writer, I'm just a reader, but I think that that could have been done maybe a little bit better. And the second thing that I'd like to talk about is I really missed that delicious dark humor that was running through the first two things that I read. And you know, when the Joker comes on the scene, I thought, oh yes, here we go. I'm going to get to hear some of that horrifyingly hilarious one-liners from him, and it wasn't there. I mean, not at all. I don't think there was one little bit of dark humor in this, and that's okay. I was just a tiny bit disappointed because, I mean, isn't that kind of what the Joker is all about? I thought this was a really solid story. I very much enjoyed it, and I would definitely read it again. I have to have more Elseworld for sure. All right, so last time I started ranking whatever it was I was reading. Now I'm up to having read 3 things. I think eventually after I read enough, I might have to go to a top 5 or a top 10. So anyway, coming in at number 3 is Superman Speeding Bullets. And at number 2 is Superman, the Man of Steel. I do have to say that those two could have gotten reversed this week. The only thing that was keeping that from happening was Speeding Bullets. It was just that ending and the dark humor thing. All right, so hanging on at number 1 for 2 weeks in a row is Batman, The Killing Joke. All right, guys, I'm out of here, but please stay tuned. I'll be right back.